In Japan, there are many stories about places where people have encountered things that cannot be explained by logic. In this country, ancient traditions, belief in spirits, and old legends are still closely connected with modern life. Many Japanese people believe that the world of humans and the world of spirits exist very close to each other. Sometimes this boundary becomes so thin that people begin to notice strange things. Footsteps in empty houses, silhouettes in the darkness, or voices where no one is present. Today, I will tell you several stories based on events described by real people. Some of them happened quite recently, while others became known many years ago. But all of these stories have one thing in common: they are difficult to explain. The first story happened in Tokyo, in a quiet residential area where a family decided to buy an old house. The house looked completely ordinary: a 2-story wooden building, a small yard, and a narrow street nearby. The neighborhood was peaceful, the neighbors were friendly, and at first everything seemed perfect. The first few days after moving in were calm. The family was settling in, unpacking their belongings, and slowly getting used to the new place. But about a week later, the owner of the house began to notice strange things. One night, when everyone was asleep, he heard quiet footsteps on the second floor. At first, he thought it was just the creaking of an old house. However, the footsteps sounded as if someone was slowly walking down the hallway. He went upstairs, turned on the light, and checked the rooms, but no one was there. A few days later, the same thing happened again. It was night, and once again the same footsteps could be heard. This time, they were louder. The man went upstairs again, checked every room, and even looked out the windows, but everything was empty. Gradually, the strange events began to happen more often. Sometimes the doors in the house would open by themselves. Sometimes the kitchen lights would turn on in the middle of the night. The man's wife said that occasionally she heard quiet sounds that resembled whispering, even though no one else was nearby. One night, something happened that truly frightened them. The wife woke up in the middle of the night and went to the kitchen. As she stepped into the hallway, she saw the silhouette of a person. At the end of the corridor stood a woman. She was wearing a long white kimono, and her face was hidden behind long black hair. The woman stood completely still and did not move. The wife became frightened and turned on the light, but at that very moment, the silhouette disappeared. The next day, the family decided to talk to their neighbors. One elderly neighbor told them that another family had lived in that house before. According to him, many years ago, a tragedy had occurred there. The woman who lived in the house had been going through a serious conflict within her family and one day took her own life. After that, the house remained empty for a long time. After hearing this story, the family decided to invite a priest from a local Shinto shrine. He performed a purification ritual in the house. People say that after that ritual, the strange events stopped. The footsteps were no longer heard, the doors stopped opening on their own, and the house became quiet again. But many neighbors still believe that something strange continues to exist in that place. The second story is connected with a well-known tunnel near Kyoto. This tunnel was built many decades ago and is considered one of the most frightening places in the area. Local residents try to avoid driving through it at night. There are many stories about strange events in this tunnel. Some drivers claim that they have seen people suddenly appear in the middle of the road. When the car gets closer, the person simply disappears. One such story happened to a group of students. They decided to check whether the tunnel was really as scary as people said. Late at night, they drove there in a car. At first, everything was normal. They were joking and laughing while recording the road on their phones. When the car entered the tunnel, the radio suddenly began producing strange static noise. The sound became distorted and loud, One of the students said it was probably just a bad signal, but a few seconds later, the driver noticed something in the rearview mirror. On the back seat, where no one had been sitting, a dark silhouette appeared for a brief moment. It looked like the shape of a person. The students immediately turned around, but the back seat was empty. When the car left the tunnel, the radio started working normally again. Nothing else strange happened, but everyone in the car said that at that moment they suddenly felt very cold and had the strange feeling that someone else had been there with them. The third story happened at the foot of Mount Fuji, in a forest known for its dense trees and unusual silence. The forest is so thick that once you enter it, you can barely hear the wind. Many people say it is very easy to get lost there. One tourist decided to take a walk along a trail in that forest. At first, everything was peaceful. He walked along the path, took photos of the trees, and enjoyed the scenery. But after some time, he noticed that the trail had become less visible. The trees around him were getting thicker and closer together. When he stopped to check his map, he heard a quiet sound. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then the sound began to resemble a voice. The voice was faint and seemed to come from somewhere far away. The tourist thought he heard someone calling his name. He turned around, but there was no one there. A few minutes later, he heard the same voice again. This time, it sounded slightly louder. It felt as if someone was standing somewhere behind the trees. The tourist quickly decided to return along the trail. When he finally managed to leave the forest, he told local residents about what had happened. They told him that strange things sometimes occur in that forest, and that some people claim to hear voices when they walk there alone. After that experience, the tourist admitted that he would never return to that forest again. Stories like these are told in many different parts of Japan. Some people believe they are simply coincidences or tricks of the imagination. Others are convinced that there are things in this world that humans still cannot explain. And perhaps that is why stories like these continue to appear again and again, because sometimes people encounter something that leaves more questions than answers.